Hey guys, it's Saturday, and on this channel that means that it is time for me to talk about an episode of a superhero animated series. Today I will be talking about the episode of the Legion of Superheroes cartoon titled Chained Lightning. If you have not seen this episode, or if you have but it's been a while, I will be recapping the plot, so keep that in mind if you do or do not like spoilers. We begin with the origin of how Lightning Lad and his brother got their powers, which is cool for the comic book fans who are familiar with the Legion of the comic books, because this origin is pretty spot on to what we got in the comics to an extent. Instead of all three of the Rand siblings getting lightning powers, Garth's twin sister Ayla disappears. In the present day, we see that Mekt is now working with Imperiex, who is himself working with the Dominators, as we saw very briefly at the end of the two-part Season 2 premiere. They are using a gigantic lightning storm out in the middle of outer space to power a giant weapon which will be very bad for the galaxy. Also, what the what? Lightning Lad loses an arm. Anyway, we find out this lightning storm is actually Ayla herself, and Lightning Lad convinces Mekt to help the Legion bring Ayla back, even though it will mean betraying Imperiex. Mekt agrees, they save Ayla, and Mekt decides that he needs to start atoning for the last 10 years of being a jerk/criminal, and he willingly goes to what I assume is Takron Galtos for his crimes. Cue credits. So this may just be my favorite episode of the entire series. Man, so much to love about this. I'm glad that we actually have a reason for Mekt and Garth to hate each other. They both seem to blame each other for Ayla's death, and also, while it's not outright stated, I'm sure that they both hate themselves for continuing to live on while they thought that their sister was dead. This is something that I totally buy as a reason for these two to not stand each other. Sure, when we first saw Mekt, his whole thing was trying to humiliate and defeat Garth, and that was about it. But surely that can be a trait that Mekt has that sprung from his blaming Garth for Ayla's death. These separate motivations for Mekt can fit together, and I do buy them together. And while I was more or less okay with Mekt is a jerk and that's just the way it is, and I wasn't exactly looking for anything there to explain their complicated relationship, now that we've got something, I'm totally on board with it. And I definitely love that Mekt is shown actually being a human being here, and not just a bwahaha I am an evil jerkhole that he was in his previous appearances. Even though this show is still giving us characters on the side of the good guys who haven't been fleshed out at all, it's nice that it tries to make one of the villains seem like a real person and not just a vehicle for the plot to happen. And while it may seem like I am spinning my wheels here, the relationship between Garth and Mekt, while it doesn't take up a large amount of screen time in this episode, is easily some of the best stuff of the series. Again, because it feels real. In 22 minutes, I come to care about this whole family and seeing them get a happy ending, and that cannot be an easy thing to accomplish, even in twice that amount of time. Heck, there are some full-length feature films that fail to make me care about the relationship between characters, so when a cartoon succeeds at it in 22 minutes, that's worthy of our applause. Okay, so some things I did not like. I guess this is actually something I should have mentioned at the end of the two-part premiere, but who are the Dominators? As a comic book fan, I know who they are. They're evil aliens who frequently are seen in the Legion of Superheroes comic books and sometimes in the present-day DC universe. But the big jaw-dropping reveal that Imperiex is working with the Dominators doesn't really work at all unless you've read some comic books before, right? And not just, yeah, I read a few Batman comics, but yeah, I'm pretty familiar with most of the DC universe. It's either presumptuous or sloppy that this show expects the audience to know who these guys are without setting them up in any way. I'd be okay with the Dominators being used if they had just been set up once in Season 1. Especially since so many of the Season 1 episodes could have been easily done away with in order to at least say, this is an evil alien species that has been at war with the United Planets for decades, or something like that. And after that reveal that shows that Imperiex is now allied with the Dominators, we still haven't gotten a good look at them. Are they going to do anything, or is Imperiex just going to use them as an army of cannon fodder? If the Dominators are background characters and their only role in this series is subservient allies to Imperiex, and you could easily replace them with the Khunds or the Durlans, then why even bother at all? Why not just say that Imperiex is hiding out, biding his time, waiting to strike? Why does he even need an army when he was portrayed as being so terrifyingly powerful in the season premiere? For that matter, why does Imperiex need Mecht? How did these two meet? I know that there is no way to do this story unless you say that Mecht is working with Imperiex, but it really does not make any sense at all, both with how these two came to work together and with what we've seen of Imperiex before. And speaking of Imperiex, last we saw of him, he had all of the information that the Legion of Superheroes had in their computer banks. Why hasn't he put this to good use? Not only would this have strategic information about the United Planets and possibly enemies of the United Planets, who Imperiex could either manipulate into doing his bidding or could destroy, but the information in the computer files also no doubt pertain to the Legionnaires, right? Like Brainiac 5, we've seen that he keeps tabs on Superman's weakness to kryptonite. So does he keep a note that Lightning Lad is powerless against rubber gloves in the Legion computers, just in case? If Imperiex has this information, why haven't we seen him do anything with it? It'd be one thing if this was like 4 days after the premiere, but it sure doesn't seem like it. This goes back to the problem I had in the previous episode, Cry Wolf. This season has set up a pretty serious looking overall season arc, and then immediately jumps into 2 standalone episodes that have absolutely nothing to do with the season long arc. Now, I liked parts of Cry Wolf, but I felt it was sloppy that it made no mention of the big deal that is supposed to be Imperiex in the 31st century. And at least this episode does show Imperiex, and now the Legion knows that he's working with the Dominators. But really, this episode is just as important to the story of Imperiex trying to conquer the universe as Cry Wolf was, which is not at all. And again, let me reiterate that I don't have a problem with standalone episodes, but don't set up this season-long storyline in such a way where it seems absolutely imperative that the Legion stops Imperiex yesterday, and then you go through 2 episodes where they are just casually doing nothing about that Imperiex problem and saving the galaxy in other less important ways. Why isn't Superman from the 41st century yelling at these guys to do something to find Imperiex before now? I mean, besides the fact that his personality seems to have been completely rebooted since the season premiere. And this whole thing about Imperiex doing evil in the 31st century, it's only going to become more problematic the longer this show fails to do something about it. If we get another 3 standalone episodes where Bouncing Boy must return to his home world to run for mayor, then it's going to feel really weird and forced when suddenly we are reminded that Imperiex is a threat that the Legion should have been pursuing in earnest all along. Also, before I forget, this episode tries to do a storyline with Shrinking Violet, who we've only seen in passing in this series so far. She's okay, I guess. Apparently we're supposed to care that she's being snubbed by Brainiac 5, and then we see, and he sees as well, that she's more than just her powers to shrink. It feels somewhat strange because Brainiac 5 really didn't display any of his typical traits of arrogance and jerkerisms that he so proudly displays in the comic books before now. This Brainiac 5 in this episode almost seems like an entirely different character than the one in the previous episodes. But yeah, Shrinking Violet is here. I guess it's fun. I do appreciate that this show is trying to show us that the team is a legion and is not the same 6 people like it seemed to do in Season 1 so often. So even though I don't really care about Shrinking Violet, I'm glad that we're seeing more members of the team every once in a while. And if we are going to see more team members, this is the way to do it. Showcase them for an episode and don't try to shove every character into the episode. And I guess I do like that Violet and Brainiac are friends at the end of this episode, which I think is a callback to the 3-boot era of the comic books where Violet was almost a hidden weapon that Brainiac would use to help him in his plans. So that's pretty cool. That's just about all I have to say about this episode, I think. Really solid episode with a great ending and some amazing character moments for a main character and a recurring character. Even with all of the things I don't care about here, this is still pretty amazing. And that's it for this episode, guys. If you like this kind of review, be sure to come back next week to hear me talk about an episode of Batman the Animated Series. And the following weekend, I'll be talking about another episode of the Legion of Superheroes. And be sure to stop by throughout the week to see other videos from my channel. And if you like this video, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. Until next time, have a great day.